and welcome to the podcast that in the game of life is wearing a shirt that says champions on back to front, has its national flag draped around its neck, and is posing for photos whilst chewing on the winner's medal. It's the big man up top.
Yes, it is.
How are you doing, Anthony?
I am good. How are you, Ed?
I'm very good. Now, look, we love having you on the podcast, Anthony. But usually when you're on, it means something's gone wrong.
Yeah, usually.
What's gone wrong here?
Well, Joe has decided to go on holiday, right?
He has. He's decided to go on holiday and basically not tell us until the day before.
Yeah.
Essentially. We were all at the podcast show last week when he just sort of sheepishly, while sitting next to me, said, "Oh, by the way, Ed, I can't make it on next week's episode." And we said, well, maybe we can pre-record on the Friday. He says, no, I'm going to the cricket. So, yeah. So thanks, Joe.
Who even watches cricket?
Exactly. So leaving us in the lurch, but we have Anthony here stepping up. So we're really excited to have you on. You on again. You are a much-loved member of the team, and it's good to hear your voice again.
Yes, I am very excited to be here. So what are we going to chat about today, Ed?
So we have the playoff finals. I think that's probably the really exciting bit of drama. We are also going to touch on the final day of the Premier League season as well, and we're also going to have a preview of the Champions League final as well, Anthony.
Very exciting.
Very excited. First, I think it is really important that we mention the situation in Liverpool. So for anybody that missed it, there were 4 children amongst the 50 people that were injured after a car ploughed into a crowd during Liverpool's Premier League victory parade on Monday evening. Now, we record this on Tuesday morning. There's not a lot of information going on. It's all a little bit chaotic. We don't know a great deal about what's actually happened, and I'm sure that more information will come out over the next few days. But for now, what we can do is offer our prayers for all involved. We pray for the emergency services who had to deal with a really difficult situation last night. We pray for the health of all of those injured, and we also pray for the peace over Liverpool, a wonderful city at this time.
Well, Ed, we do have this lovely little trivia game called Bible Ballers.
Yes.
And when we have a guest on, it's usually the guest's chance to quiz you.
Yeah, that's right. It would feel wrong of me to quiz you, Anthony. So you're going to quiz me today, aren't you?
Yes, and last time I was on, I was a little bit unfair.
Terribly unfair. Gave me. Was it John Charles?
Yes, a nice difficult one.
Nice difficult one. But this game, for anybody who hasn't heard it before, is Bible Ballers. It's guess the player with a difference. So Anthony's going to give me some clues to who this player is, but the player will share his first name with the name of a book in the Bible. So you say you're going easy on me this week?
Yes, I'm going easy on you.
That's good. And do I get triple points? I think I heard triple points maybe mentioned, maybe quadruple points, and maybe I'll then be within reach of Joe.
Yeah, I might even get a little bit close to Joe.
Well, let's see how we get on. Please fire away with your question.
Okay, so which African forward played over 150 games for Chelsea and helped his national team win only their second ever trophy?
Oh, goodness. I mean, we come back to, is there a book of Didier Drogba? don't we? You know. But yeah, I mean, they've had plenty of great African players at Chelsea over the years. I'm going to have a think about this one.
Yeah, well, I'll give you to the end of the episode to think about it.
Okay, let's have a think. I think it makes sense to start with, for me, the big drama of the weekend, which was the Championship playoff final, Anthony.
Yes, definitely.
Did you watch this by any chance?
I caught the highlights. They had some nice extended highlights on YouTube, which was
lovely.
Very useful.
Yeah, so, well, in this one, it was Sheffield United versus Sunderland, and both sides really coming in with a lot of form, particularly Sheffield United. They've played really, really well all season. And it was a really great game. It was fiery. It was a lot of attacking football. Both sides really going for it. What I would say is it very much felt like a game of two halves. Classic, classic football cliche, but really, really summed it up. The game started off with a great goal from former Stoke player Tyrese Campbell, because of course he has left Stoke and gone on to be a much better player than he ever was. But no, I'm really delighted for him because he's quite clearly a very talented player. He's also had a really difficult year with the sad passing of his father, and it just felt to me like this last part of the season he's really deserved it, and he played really, really well in this game. Scored a really great first goal around the 25-minute mark. And honestly, Sheffield United absolutely dominated. At this point, there was a bit of a controversy in that they scored a second goal that was ruled out for VAR. And of course, VAR not in use in the Championship, but was in use for this game. What do you make of that, Anthony?
That always feels a bit weird. Like, I know Wembley has VAR, so they want to use it at any chance they get, but to have it only be available for the final game of the season, the Championship playoff final, it does seem odd that you would have it just for this one game.
I do think it's strange, and again, because you can ask what, some people say, well, it's still the same game and you're just adding an extra layer of officiating, but also slightly, like, having VAR, it does affect how you play the game. It affects things like whether the linesmen are playing on and all that sort of stuff. In this situation, the ball was ricocheting around the box and there was a strike into a crowded goal mouth that went in, and there was a striker right in the sort of eye line, essentially right next to the goalkeeper who was offside. Yeah. It was a good call, I think, by the VAR, but there is some argument to say, would that have been given without VAR? I'm not entirely sure. Very crowded penalty.
I think if you're a Sunderland fan and you lose because of that goal, then you're going to be very annoyed.
And what actually ended up happening was that as a result, it felt like Sunderland got a second wind. It was quite early on. It was still in the first half, but there was this sense that Sunderland had been underperforming up to this point. Sheffield United had definitely dominated. And then Sheffield, they'd had this second goal chalked off, and all of a sudden the tide turned. We went into the second half. Sunderland then really became the dominant side at 1-0 down. A wonderful goal from Mayenda.
That was fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. The ball, he's sort of taken the ball in his stride on his right foot and just absolutely launched it into the roof of the net with 15 minutes to go. All of a sudden, game on. And then teenager Tommy Watson scores a 95th minute winner to send Sunderland up into the Premier League. And what was really, really cruel about this one was that Kiefer Moore, who had a superb game, gave the ball away in a really poor position, and it just felt like you could just see him like sprinting back going, oh no, what have I done? And Watson picks the ball up and just manages to sort of take it past somebody and just curl it into the far post. And I just felt it was a great moment for Sunderland. Awful for Kiefer Moore.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that Watson's also agreed to join Brighton. Like, he'd already agreed like a couple of weeks ago, I think, that he was going to leave at the end of the season. So to be able to have that as like your last bit of action for Sunderland, it must feel great for him to know that he can leave them on a high. Leave them on a high, and also just leave them as a permanent club legend. I haven't really kept an eye on how well he's been playing for them, but I mean, he only needs to do that, and that's it. You just score one incredibly important goal, and that's it. But yes, Sunderland find themselves back in the Premier League. And I think Sheffield United can feel very aggrieved in the sense that it was just not their day. Especially, I think, because they've been involved in the title picture for so long as well. It was like those three teams, Burnley, Leeds and Sheffield United, are all fighting for those automatic promotion spots. And it happens sometimes that like you have a long season where you've got the disappointment of only getting into the playoffs, and then you just can't quite push through to win that final game. But yeah, credit to Sunderland. Credit to Sunderland. And going into League One, credit to Charlton Athletic, who beat Leyton Orient 1-0. A goal from Macaulay Gillespie, a first-half free kick, was enough to seal the deal for them. The picture on BBC Sport, which I thoroughly enjoy, is not of the team holding the playoff trophy, but it's of Nathan Jones. We've talked about Nathan Jones. And very much box office manager, as Phil Knox referred to him as. Loves the cameras, and there he is holding the trophy aloft on his own, and none of his team around him. But Charlton have played really, really well, and jokes about Nathan Jones aside, I think he's absolutely fantastic, shows an awful lot of passion, and a 5-year exile has been quashed. They are back in the second tier, Charlton. Yeah, it's good for them. I always remember them from the Alan Kirbishley days of classic, lower mid-table of the Premier League, just about surviving every year. Jason Ewell, did he play for them? Jason Ewell, that feels about right. Yeah. I do want to say though, I think that
Again, this feels right to me because of the fact that it was Leyton Orient in the playoff final with them. They had a great season. They should be very proud of themselves. But again, they snuck in at the last minute. They were outside of the playoff picture for so long, snuck in at the last minute. And I feel like, for me, it has to be somebody who's been there or thereabouts for the whole season. And so that felt more right that Charlton would win this one. But also, speaking of things feeling right, AFC Wimbledon.
Oh, yes.
In League One.
The Crazy Gang.
The Crazy Gang are back, beating Walsall 1-0. Again, in terms of the game, not a great deal going on here. First half injury time goal.
It was a very League Two goal as well.
Yeah, it very much was. But I think that it's one of those things where, as I say, Wimbledon, a great story. We must do a proper episode about AFC Wimbledon at some point, because it feels like the most resurrection type football story going. But yeah, it's just one of those teams that I think most football fans can see the journey they've been on and kind of root for them.
Yeah.
So they find themselves in League One next season.
Yeah, a league above MK Dons.
I know. Whisper it quietly. But are they the bigger Dons? Well, almost certainly now. Almost certainly.
I think also they're a word for Walsall, because they're very similar to Sheffield United in that they were up at the top and had quite a lead at one point in League Two, but then just kind of fell away in the second half of the season and just couldn't get that energy back to get through the playoffs. So yeah, a bit sad for them, but yeah, all credit to AFC Wimbledon.
Absolutely. Let's move on to talk about the final day of the Premier League season, Anthony. Now, we wanted to cover this second to the playoff final because there wasn't the sort of drama. The only thing, as we mentioned before, to play for was the European spots. I wanted to start with a place where there was absolutely no drama whatsoever, which was Liverpool and Crystal Palace. Now, we have this sort of odd situation where, because the FA Cup was before the final day of the Premier League season, we had both the champions-elect and also the FA Cup winners, both just basically having a kickabout.
Yeah, no need to play the Community Shield next season.
Yeah, exactly. It was essentially a warm-up for the Charity Shield. But they did a lovely thing, didn't they, at the start of this game?
Yeah, each team, well, some people would say lovely, some people would say a little bit unnecessary.
Choreographed,
yeah,
stage.
choreographed.
Cynical people would say that, Anthony.
Yes, we're not going to be cynical
No.
We're going to be very happy for Joe that Liverpool got their guard of honour and also Crystal Palace got their guard of honour, both at the beginning of the game.
It started out with the Crystal Palace players making the tunnel for the Liverpool players, and then they made a tunnel once they got to the end for Crystal Palace to walk through. I really wanted them to carry on. Just do another one. Let's just keep going. Let's
keep going all the way across.
Let's just go across the pitch. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it would have been nice if they'd done the Crystal Palace one at the start of the second half.
Yeah.
Just to break it up a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just to make it a bit more interesting. But there were definitely some winners and losers from the final day. Obviously, again, we're talking about European Cup places. Let's start at Fulham and Man City. Man City getting a 2-0 win here, Anthony. Did you catch this one?
A little bit of it. It was just a very regulation win. Like, there wasn't that much threat. Haaland took a penalty and scored it.
I know, that was probably the biggest bit of drama, was who's going to take this penalty, and Haaland stepped up and slotted it home, didn't he?
Yeah, but like City were pretty much confirmed to be in the Champions League spot, so there wasn't that much drama for them, and they just did a professional job, which sometimes this season they haven't been able to do, so looks like maybe they're getting back in form.
And this is it. We've talked about City and whether they can call this season, a success. Actually, to be fair, considering how bad it got at one point, at least they've got Champions League football, and I know at one point there was a serious discussion that they might not get that. Hearing the interview with Erling Haaland after the game, I remember him saying something like, I have to play Champions League football. This club has to play Champions League football. So it just shows what it means to the players to get that qualification. Talking about sort of the winners and losers, I think probably fitting into both camps. Newcastle, who were definitely losers on the day, but I think winners overall. So they lost 1-0 at home to Everton, but still qualifying for the Champions League, Anthony.
Yeah, and it was a funny game for Newcastle because you would feel with so much on the line that they would really be pushing for it because they were in a good position. But they just didn't seem to have that energy and that desire that they've had earlier in the season.
What's going to be interesting again is seeing how they take this into next year. They've had their money, they've had their players, and they've built well. They've built solidly, and they've got a really, really strong defence and some exciting players going forward. Can they keep the likes of Isak and all that sort of stuff? And I think given the investment they've had, I think that's going to be the key thing, is can they just build one step further?
I think the fact that they did get into the Champions League makes it a lot easier for them to keep the key players this summer and then, just build on that.
Next, in the winners and losers, this is an interesting one because we had 2 in 1 game. Forest losing 1-0 to Chelsea. Let's talk about Chelsea first. What would you sort of assess them in terms of like their season broadly?
They're such a weird one. There's been a question about whether they've actually improved over last season. And I think you have to say they have, but not by much.
What I would say as well is, let's remember, Joe said they were going to be challenging for the title this year.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he's not here today. But no, again, Champions League qualification, I think probably in the same boat as Newcastle, really. Like, if you keep making little bits of progress, surely that's good. And you've got a young squad, lot to be excited about next year. Now, in this same game, we have Nottingham Forest, who ended up missing out on even Europa League qualification, finishing in 7th. And because Spurs taking the other Champions League spot, they find themselves in the Conference League next year. I mean, I look at that and I think, gosh, before the season, of course Forest fans would have taken this, but this feels so disappointing to me to have seen Forest drop off the way they have.
Yeah, I think especially the way the game went as well. Like, Chris Wood had 2 really good chances, which if he scores those 2, then they're in the Champions League. The way the other games went with Newcastle and Villa, all they had to do was win their game. It was in their hands and they just couldn't get over the line. But yeah, overall, I think once like a month or 2 is gone, they can look back and say, yeah, this is done. But in the moment, you're never going to be happy about it.
Once the dust settles, as they say.
Yes.
But I think you're right, and especially if they can keep hold of that forward line, Alanga, Morgan Gibbs-White, Chris Wood, all that sort of stuff, and they can keep this firing into next season. Again, it's exciting.
Yeah, I do worry a little bit about Chris Wood just because he is already in his mid-30s.
He's getting on a bit.
I mean, I know pace isn't really a big part of his game.
We talked about age in a previous episode. He's got years left in him, Anthony. It's fine. And then we're going to touch on a surprise win, I think, for your team, Man United winning 2-0 at home to Villa. What did you make of this one as a United fan yourself?
It's so frustrating. Like, to have this after the Europa League final, where this was a game where United played really well. They were better than Villa. They were deservedly winners, even though there was the controversy of the Morgan Rogers goal, which was disallowed. United played really well. They hit the post like 3 times as well. So they could have easily have scored 5 in the game.
Classic. You just turn up on the last day. It's like at school. We're just watching films and playing board games. It's the greatest day to be there. You turn up, you get there early. It's fantastic. Yeah. Maybe United can turn up for the actual season next year.
I think the thing about United this season has been their first 11. You look at it and you say, actually, if everyone's fit, they could be fighting for Europe easily. But the moment like 1 or 2 key players get injured, it all just falls apart.
A couple of talking points from this game. Obviously, the big one was the Morgan Rogers incident and VAR. So for anyone who missed it, the ball trickles towards the goalkeeper, doesn't it? He's about to pick it up and doesn't get it under control. He doesn't get 2 hands on it. He doesn't have one hand pushing it to the floor. And Rogers sort of gets his foot in and sort of pokes it away. He's essentially got then an open goal to slot in.
Yeah.
But by this point, the referee has blown up. He's blown up quickly to say, no, you've challenged the goalkeeper. And I think the argument is, we've been talking about VAR and how they've been letting play go on. Well, in this case, had they have let play go on, the VAR would have almost certainly come to the aid of Villa and said, well, actually, the goalkeeper didn't have it under control.
It was a mistake by the referee, but you can see why the referee made the mistake. He wasn't in a bad position, but the way it went, you don't expect the goalkeeper to not pick up the ball there.
And there's been a whole thing as well about the referee generally refereeing more championship games, I think, than Premier League games.
Yeah.
And, so maybe he was more used to sort of blowing up and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So
I think it has to be said, though, that was the only thing the referee really got wrong in the game.
Yes,
and
definitely.
From the position he was, I mean, we had just a couple of weeks ago a situation where a Nottingham Forest player got badly injured because the play went on. If you're looking at an attacker running in on a goalkeeper the way he is, and if you think that there's any issue of player safety, you do need to blow up early.
One of the things that also happened at the end of this game is that Ruben Amorim came out at the end, grabbed a microphone, and with his team in the centre circle, addressed the crowd and very much sort of said, we're sorry for how this season's gone, which is quite remarkable, isn't it?
I think it's what's needed, though, because this has been the worst United season in about 50 years.
It needed addressing.
Yes, it needed addressing, and it's been something that's been building up for over a decade now, of just like not just Amorim, but like all the management above him, specifically the previous leadership of the Glazers and Ed Woodward. There's been just a very slow but very constant decline in Manchester United for at least a decade, and it's just hit a point where something has to change. And I think Amorim recognises that. The new leadership, Ineos, as much as they've made choices that make people unhappy recently, a lot of the choices they've had to make just to keep things going. So it's not a good position for United, but at least it's being recognised inside the club.
Absolutely. Speaking of it being a terrible season, we haven't really touched on the Europa League final from before this weekend. We were at the podcast conference, and the following morning we said to Anthony, Joe and I, "Did you watch the game, Anthony?" And he said, "No, I sat and listened to it." And we just had visions of you sitting in your hotel room just with all the lights off, just listening to the radio broadcast.
I was debating what's sadder, listening in my hotel room or going out and finding a pub full of Tottenham fans.
Yeah, exactly. Not great to do that in London. But yeah, I mean, again, terrible quality of game. Neither side deserved to win the Europa League final. And ideally, you'd have just said, no, none of you can have this. Let's give it to Bodo Glimt. And,
like the only moment of quality wasn't even the goal. It was the goal line clearance by Van de Ven.
Yeah.
And like everything else was just terrible. Even the own goal from Shaw, which was just like United giving the ball away and then a half decent cross hit in and then put into his own goal off the arm of Shaw. But yeah, like very disappointing for United fan, but also I think I said to you the next day, a bit of a relief as well, because now we know how bad it is. We're not papering over the cracks anymore like we have been previous seasons. And we actually have to look at the issue and deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the Champions League. And we're going to start with the women's game. Arsenal winning the Women's Champions League, Anthony. Tell us about this one.
Oh, yeah, this is a very interesting game. Arsenal were big underdogs going into this. They'd already beaten Real Madrid and Lyon to get to this point, which again, they were underdogs in those games as well. So they've been used to that this season. But Barca going for the three-peat, trying to win 3 in a row of the Champions League, really, really strong favourites. And in the first half, Arsenal just went for it. They were just like, we're just going to attack you. We don't care. And then in the second half, Barcelona came back, looked stronger. Arsenal were forced to be on the counter. But then they brought on their super sub, Stina Blackstenius.
Well done.
Thank you. She came on as a sub, had only been on for like, I think, less than 10 minutes when the ball was kind of played down the right-hand side, cut back onto the edge of the area, and a little clever through ball to Stina. And yeah, really nice finish. And after that, Arsenal were just able to hold on, get the win. It's really good for them because, of course, at the beginning of the season, they were all over the place. Their manager, Jonas Everdahl, was forced to resign because they just had such a terrible start to the season. His assistant, René Slegers, basically just stepped up and took them back into European qualification, guided them through this really difficult Champions League draw. And yeah, all credit to her, all credit to Arsenal, because they've pulled off a massive underdog story this season.
Moving on to the men's game, we're not going to focus on the prodigy that is Scott McTominay and Napoli, although I would absolutely love to, because
I love some Scott McTominay.
That has been an absolutely fantastically bizarre story. But let's touch on the Champions League final coming up. PSG versus Inter. This is going to be great, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be great. I'm so excited for it. This Saturday, 8 p.m.
It's such a good prospect for a game because you've got PSG, of course. They've been to the final recently. They got very close, but then lost Mbappe at the beginning of this season, and they look the better for it even. They feel like they've really become more of a team since Mbappe left. And then on the other side, you've got Inter, who also have been to the final recently, just 2 seasons ago. They beat Barca and Bayern and AC Milan. to get to the final. So they've really shown their qualities as well. But what we've really got here is two teams that have basically put their faith in managers to imprint their style.
Yeah.
PSG really keeping the ball, like those three midfielders, just really, really tenacious and really, really good off the ball as well as on the ball. And then Inter looking to counter down the right wing with Denzel Dumfries just being a crazy madman and always attacking. And it looks like it could be a really, really good game of PSG looking to hold the ball and Inter looking to counterpunch.
Let's get some predictions in, Anthony. What do you think? Yours first, and then I'll give you mine.
Oh, I think it's going to be 3-1 to PSG, but Inter will score first.
Okay, I'm going for 3-2 to Inter.
Oh,
That's what I think it's going to be a proper chaotic European night to remember. Now, I know we are in the middle of an episode, but we here at the Big Man Up Top are incredibly excited to tell you about The Gathering, which is a men's weekend festival like no other. We've got our good friend Nathan Blackaby and his team from Christian Vision for Men putting on an awesome event, and he's going to tell you about it right now.
Are you looking for the ultimate men's weekend this summer? From June the 20th to the 22nd, head to a field near Swindon for The Gathering, the UK's biggest Christian men's festival. We're talking about live comedy, cool cars, five-a-side football, walking football, live music, powerful worship, massive bonfire, UCB will be there and loads more. Axe throwing, huge inflatables, volleyball, scale electrics, plus real-life stories, gospel Bible teaching, inspiring talks that will challenge and encourage you. Whether you are a Christian or just interested, this weekend is tailor-made for you and the perfect one to bring your mates to, with a bar, great food, top environment and vibes, an unforgettable moment this year. The Gathering 2025 is not to be missed. Head over to thegatheringformen.com.
And the best thing about The Gathering is that this year, who else will be there but Joe and Ed from the Big Man Up Top? Yes, that's right. We will be doing our first ever live show. Isn't that incredible? You'll get to actually grill Joe on his various different terrible opinions. You'll get to berate me on how bad I am at the quiz. But yeah, it'll just be great to meet you all. So please make sure you get yourself down to The Gathering. As Nathan said, you can find out more at thegatheringformen.com. Now, one topic we've been talking about doing for quite a while has been this idea of when players fail. Now, we've had emails about this as well from listeners just saying, can we touch on, what happens when these players, often young players, these are young guys, who publicly have these sort of stories about them where they make mistakes, whether that's drink or drugs or whatever it might be. What does the Bible and what does the gospel have to say about that? And there's been a couple of stories from the last week that I think it's fair to say have gone under the radar. So it might have escaped your attention that former Manchester United star Brandon Williams has received a suspended prison sentence for dangerous driving and driving without insurance, and has been sentenced to a 14-month jail term. This has been suspended for 2 years. But his story is really one of the last year or so. Things have really, really gone downhill for him, and obviously he's still quite young. And there's another story of J. Emmanuel Thomas, and the Arsenal prodigy. I remember this a decade ago. He was the next big thing at Arsenal, and he has recently admitted his part in a plot to smuggle £600,000 of cannabis into the country. The 34-year-old striker was sacked by the Scottish club Greenock Morton when he was arrested last year. And again, look, this isn't in any way to sort of comment on these specific cases, but I think it is just to use this as a springboard to say there are loads of stories all the time about players who have, these big mistakes in their life where things seem to go wrong, isn't there? It's not a new story.
Yeah, it's one that you just see over and over again, especially at the bigger clubs. The one I always think of is Ravel Morrison at United, who was playing alongside Paul Pogba in the youth teams and was considered the biggest prospect at United in a generation. And he just had so many problems outside of the club that the team tried to give him chance after chance after chance, and just eventually they said, we can't keep doing this because you're not looking to change yourself.
And just to sort of highlight that this isn't a new thing, because a lot of people can go, oh, well, you just, this is what happens when you give, young players, 50, 100 grand a week or whatever. And I think there's definitely something to say in that. But there was a story from the 70s of a player called Robin Friday. He has a bonkers story, and essentially a story of a player who was unbelievably talented but could just never get a break in a big team, never played for England despite being very much talented enough to do so, because his life was so chaotic off the pitch with all sorts of things, and he just made mistake after mistake after mistake, and managers couldn't trust him, and they would take a punt on him at one club and then it would all sort of blow up in his face, and just a real story of like such a shame of wasted potential. Now, I've got a bit of a chat with Christian Wienkamp. We've heard him on the podcast before from Sports Chaplaincy UK, and I was asking him about what role does a chaplain play in players, when they go through difficult situations like this. Christian Wienkamp from Sports Chaplaincy UK. Welcome to the Big Man Up Top. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I am well, and it's good to be with you.
Now, we've heard some stories in the last week or so of players at the highest levels of the game who have struggled with some difficult decisions, some questionable decisions they've made off the field that has led to scandal, led to issues with the law in some cases. And I think we wanted to just chat with you a little bit about this idea of what do we do when footballers fail? There are all sorts of different ways that somebody might make a mistake, but I think that it is fair to say that it seems to be quite a regular occurrence that we hear of players who make wrong choices. As a chaplain, how do you see your role in that situation where a player has made quite a big, high-profile mistake in their life?
Sure. To kind of strip it back a bit, I think certainly my journey as a Christian, and looking at that question from my life, I mean, I'm not a high-profile athlete, but there's been so many times in my life when I've just needed someone to sit down with me and just listen and just love me where they're at, and where I'm at. When there's been players or staff members or coaches who have been involved in something or found themselves in a situation in their life where, do you know what, I messed up big time and I don't know how to get through this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. A big part of that, and the privilege it is for us, is just to sit there and listen and not provide the answers. Sometimes there are no answers. Sometimes there are no solutions. But what we do have, more than anyone else, I'd say, in professional football, is time, where we can just sit and give our time and give our empathy and give our ears, often confidentially. Consistent presence is so much more important than just a one-time conversation. So the individual knows that you're there for the long haul. You're not just weaving in and out of their lives whenever something goes wrong, but it's actually that consistent presence. And at Sports Chaplaincy UK, that's what we're all for: embedded relationships, where we're building these relationships before crisis even happens. And I think that's important.
Tell me, how does that work in practice? What can that look like?
It's important to know that sports chaplains aren't paid by the club. We are invited guests, and that's really important, that we are in a privileged position. We've got no right to be in these clubs, but we are invited because the clubs understand that we have something of value that we can offer that a club might not be able to offer. I always like to sit down with the club when they first bring me in and kind of just highlight or emphasize the roles that chaplains can have. And that's part of it, being a mediator, where, look, clubs might not have the understanding, might not have the know-how, might not have the skill set or qualities to understand how to approach situations, where chaplains have got so much of a skill set that's sometimes not always uncovered in football clubs. And it's not until a crisis happens, a club takes a step back and thought, wow, we actually have people of real value that can add this skill set that we don't have time to give, or we don't have the resources to give, where chaplains can just sit there and just listen, but also feed back in a confidential, independent way to a club about what's going on as well.
Now, there was something you mentioned earlier on about what you have is time. And actually that's something generally in modern football that there isn't a lot of. You know, you see players getting dropped after a couple of bad games, you see managers getting the sack after a couple of bad weeks. So how do you manage that? How do you set expectations? Because these clubs have spent a lot of money on these players and they want to see things just, you know, be fixed overnight.
It is a ruthless, cutthroat industry. And I find that a lot of football is about time. It's about waiting for something. It's about waiting for training, waiting for an injury, waiting to come back from injury, waiting for the game. So many times there's players that are just sat there, just waiting for something to happen. And we're able to just embrace that time and try and use it for good. Whether it's just building those relationships and just understanding more about a player or a staff member or a coach's life. What makes you tick? What you're thinking about, what you're worried about, what are you thinking about after your career, how you're feeling in the midst of this injury, how you're feeling in the midst of this really rotten form that you're going through. And not many people have the skill set or even the time to kind of think about what questions do I even ask here, where we get to really come into the environment and kind of unpick and unblock sometimes the just silence within the time.
So you have a situation where a player has made a really terrible mistake and their life seems to be spiraling out of control. Now, look, that can happen to any of us. It's in the club's best interest to get the player back to where she or he needs to be. One set of people that can be very unforgiving or forgiving is the fans. Now, what would you say to football fans, particularly maybe football fans of faith, when thinking about these players who have made these big mistakes in their life?
It's not a pantomime. It's actually real life people that they have families, they have personal lives, just like you said we all have. And that's so crucial that when it's you're watching players in a crowd of 50, 60,000 people, understanding that there's real implications of getting on the back of the player, that they do hear the comments. Yeah, they are thick-skinned and they have got a incredibly strong mental side because they wouldn't reach that level if they didn't. However, they still have emotions and they still have stuff going on in their lives that they're just coming to their place of work. And how would we deal with someone coming to our place of work and absolutely criticizing us for 90 plus minutes? It's the same kind of thing. People just need to, especially those of faith, we need to be praying for all people, not just the Christian players, but all people in our clubs and those within our communities. We want to see our communities change, don't we? So it's about really being positive and praying and speaking life over people instead of death.
And that's it. It works for everybody's benefit, doesn't it? When we create that environment of positivity, you can allow players to move on from the mistakes they've made and actually flourish. And that's how you get the best out of them on the pitch as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. There's countless examples of that, isn't it? And some players just say, I felt like I was loved, or I felt like I belonged, or I felt like I was included. And that's not just football, that's life in general. We all feel like that.
Christian Wienkamp from Sports Chaplaincy UK, we're so grateful for your time on The Big Man Up Top.
Thanks, mate.
There's a couple of stories in the Bible that, for me, basically touch on what this means to make mistakes in your life. The first one, I think, is looking at the story of David. Now, there isn't really one specific moment in the story of David. You're just looking that he was somebody who achieved great things. He was, revered as a king, described as a man after God's own heart, but fell into sin. There was the affair with Bathsheba, arranging the death of her husband Uriah. And so there were sort of moments where he fell into temptation, made the wrong choice, and would then lament over it. And it was, so I would say he's a really complex figure in the Bible, isn't he? Because he's sort of revered as a king, but definitely wasn't great all the time.
Yeah, he had a real roller coaster of a life, especially once you hear about all the wars he had with his children as well, where the consequences of that relationship with Bathsheba just carry on throughout his years as he gets older. So it's very much a situation where even though he had very rocky times, he always went back to God, and he always said, God, I'm sorry, please help me to be better.
And this is the really crucial bit. This is one that I wanted to bring out, was the story of Jesus and the woman caught in adultery. So this is in John 8. So the Pharisees have brought a woman to Jesus to test him. This woman's been caught in adultery, and they're hoping to trap him into saying something that could be used against him. And the first thing he does is he addresses the woman directly. And the amazing thing about this story is that we don't know what he actually says. He stoops down, he writes in the dust with his finger. Again, we don't know what he's writing. Maybe it was a message to her. And then eventually they continue to press him. He stands up and he says, let anyone amongst you who's without sin be the first to throw a stone. And the accusers sort of sheepishly slip away. Then Jesus turns to the woman and says, where are they? Has no one condemned you? And she says, no one, sir. And Jesus then says, and this is the crucial bit, then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. Go and sin no more. And I think that's the key thing with all of this, is that what the Bible tells us is that despite our failings, we can still live a life of potential in God, but there has to be that choice to repent. There has to be that choice to turn away from our life of sin, and there has to be then that decision that I'm going to live for Jesus now, and I'm going to sin no more.
Yeah, we know also from the story of the parable of the prodigal son that God cares so much more about our motivation and our intentions than he does about our actions. So even though we may have messed up once or twice, even though we may have even turned away from him and tried to leave him completely, he will always welcome us back if we come back with the right intention and the right motivation and a pure, honest heart of, I'm sorry for what I've done and I'm willing to change. So, Ed, how are you feeling about the Bible Ballers this week?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got one name. So let's go for it. Question again, please.
The question again is, which African forward played over 150 games for Chelsea and helped his national team win only their second ever trophy?
So I'm struggling with a lot of this in terms of all those caps for Chelsea. I don't know. In terms of helping his team win their second ever trophy, I don't know. It's just the name that jumped at me quite early on and I can't get it out. I'm going to go for Samuel Eto'o.
Oh, that's a good one, but unfortunately it's not correct.
Oh, no. It wasn't Didier, was it? There's no book of Didier that I've missed.
The correct answer is Song of Solomon Kalou.
Oh, very good, very good. Oh, dearie me. No, I've got to be honest. I had Samuel Eto'o in my head from moment one, and I thought, that's it. I'm going for it. And so, yeah,
it's a good guess. I will give you that.
He's gone for the top corner, and it's ricocheted off the bar. But thank you anyway. Let's not tell Joe about this. That I lost again.
Okay.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Thank you so much for listening to The Big Man Up Top. If you want to get in touch with the show, please ping us an email, podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, all that lovely stuff. This will help us to get the word out. And if you've enjoyed this, make sure you tell your friends. Thank you very much for joining me, Anthony.
Very happy to be here.
And Joe will be back next week, although to be honest, I might sit him in the corner and he can just sort of chunter away, because I think this is an upgrade. So
got a nice vibe here.
Yeah, let's go for it. But there will be a new episode next Tuesday. This will be our final episode of the season.
Yeah.
We have some exciting things coming up over the summer, but make sure you're listening next week when we debrief the Champions League final. So we shall see you next week.
See ya.